I stood in the bright hallway of a Columbus hospital, watching doctors carefully examine my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, after a shocking incident at a family celebration. The person responsible wasn't a stranger. It was my own mother, Beatrice, who made a heartbreaking decision to protect a lie that changed everything. As the flashing police lights reflected through the hospital windows, I realized the elegant engagement party my family had spent months planning was about to become the moment no one there would ever forget. My name is Megan, and for 32 long years I lived under a cruel, exhausting delusion. I genuinely believe that if you love your family fiercely enough, if you bleed yourself dry for them, they will eventually love you back. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a beautifully manicured suburban neighborhood that hid a massive amount of rot behind its white picket fences. From the time I was old enough to understand the shifting dynamics of our household, I learned that my existence carried a very specific price tag. I was the eldest daughter, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who kept her head down, scrubbed the baseboards, and maintained a flawless GPA. I naively thought that my parents' affection was a trophy I could finally win if I just stayed perfectly obedient. But in our house, love wasn't something earned. It was a fixed currency, and every single cent of it belonged to my younger sister, Amber. If Amber scraped her knee, the world stopped spinning, and my mother, Beatrice, would cradle her as if she were made of spun glass. If I broke my wrist falling out of a tree, my father, Robert, would sigh loudly from behind his newspaper, complaining about the incoming medical deductibles and asking why I couldn't be more careful like my sister. I grew up feeling like an uninvited guest in my own home, a ghost moving through hallways built on favoritism. By the time I entered my 20s, I realized I wasn't just the unloved child. I was a utility. I was the person meant to absorb the blows, handle the logistics, and keep the family machinery running smoothly while Amber was polished up to be the family's shining trophy. I remember sitting at the kitchen table when I was 22, staring at my acceptance letter to Ohio State University. I was glowing with pride. When I showed it to Beatrice, she didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She simply set her coffee cup down on top of the letter, staining the paper, and looked at me with cold, calculating eyes. "Well, Megan," she said, her voice entirely flat, "I hope you don't think this means you're moving out. Your father and I need you here to manage the household billing. And frankly, Amber's private school tuition is rising. You'll need to work full-time to cover your own expenses." That was the reality of my life. I was an afterthought, an insurance policy, a shadow designed to make Amber look brighter. I accepted it because I didn't know anything else. I thought this was what daughters did. I thought this was what love looked like. I had no idea that the people who gave me life were simply fattening me up for slaughter, waiting for the moment I dared to choose myself so they could tear my world apart. For the next 4 years, I lived a double life. By day, I was a full-time student, and by evening, I was a corporate graphic designer, grinding out projects until my eyes bled. But no matter how hard I worked, my bank account always seemed to hover near zero. Why? Because Beatrice and Robert had absolute control over me. They convinced me that since I was living under their roof, it was my filial duty to hand over my debit card. Every single paycheck I earned was immediately intercepted. I became the family's silent, unpaid ATM. I remember checking my bank statement in the dead of winter, discovering that $4,000 I had painstakingly saved for a reliable car had completely vanished. When I confronted Robert, he didn't even look up from his laptop. "Amber needed a wardrobe upgrade for her sophomore year at her private academy," he said, as if he were explaining a routine utility bill. "And she's taking a spring break trip to Paris with her class. You wouldn't want your little sister to look poor in front of the country club crowd, would you, Megan? Don't be so incredibly selfish." That was their favorite weapon, calling me selfish. If I wanted to buy a winter coat that actually fit me, I was selfish. If I complained about working a 60-hour week while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, I was ungrateful. Meanwhile, Amber lived like a high society heiress. She drove a brand new Jeep that my paychecks helped finance, wore designer clothes, and never held a job a single day in her life. She was taught that the world owed her everything, and I was taught that I owed the world my very skin. Then, at 26, my entire universe shifted. I met David. David didn't see me as a utility. He didn't look at me and calculate how much labor he could extract from me. The very first time he cooked me dinner in his tiny, cramped apartment, I burst into tears just because someone was taking care of me for once. He was grounded, fiercely protective, and he saw right through my family's toxic web. When he realized that my parents were taking my entire salary while I lived off instant noodles, he sat me down, took my hands in his, and looked into my eyes with a seriousness that terrified me. "Megan," he said, "they aren't raising a daughter. They are running a business, and you are the only employee. You need to quit." It took me 6 months to find the courage, but with David's help, I finally opened a secret bank account, changed my direct deposits, and signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment with him. The night I packed my single suitcase to leave, the house erupted into pure, unadulterated violence. Beatrice didn't cry because she would miss me. She screamed because she was losing her financial buffer. She stood in the hallway, blocking the front door, her face contorted in an ugly, venomous mask. "You ungrateful, pathetic little bitch," she hissed, her voice vibrating through the walls. "After everything we did for you, you're abandoning your family for some low-class nobody? If you walk out that door, Megan, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead! You will never get a dime from us, and you will never be welcome back." Robert stood right behind her, nodding in disgusted agreement. "You're breaking this family's heart for your own selfish desires," he spat. "Don't you dare come crying to us when your little fantasy life falls apart." I walked out anyway. I married David in a quiet 5-minute ceremony at the Columbus City Hall. Not a single member of my biological family attended. They didn't send a text, a card, or a dollar. For the next 8 years, there was only dead silence. And honestly, those 8 years were the most beautiful, peaceful years of my life. Without the constant vampire drain of my family, David and I built a genuine, thriving home. I excelled in my graphic design career. We bought a charming house in a quiet neighborhood, and best of all, we welcomed our beautiful daughter Lily into the world. Lily was everything my childhood wasn't. She was showered with unconditional love, protected, and celebrated for exactly who she was. She grew into an incredibly sweet, artistic, and marsoom, innocent 8-year-old girl with big brown eyes that only saw the good in people. I thought the nightmare was over. I thought I had successfully run away from the monsters of my past. I had no idea that the toxicity running through Beatrice and Amber's veins hadn't disappeared. It had simply been fermenting, waiting for the perfect opportunity to overflow and scald my perfect life to ashes. 8 years of total, icy silence ended on a random Tuesday morning in June. I was sorting through the mail on the kitchen counter when I pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. It was embossed with thick, shimmering gold leaf lettering that screamed high society. I opened it, my hands slightly trembling as I read the words. "Robert and Beatrice cordially invite you to celebrate the engagement of their daughter, Amber, to Mr. Preston Vance III." Preston Vance. Even in Columbus, everyone knew that name. His family owned one of the largest real estate development firms in the state. They were old money, intensely conservative, and deeply concerned with public prestige. I sat down at the kitchen table, the gold-embossed card heavy in my hands. A rush of complicated, buried emotions flooded my chest. For 8 years, I had convinced myself that I was entirely over my family's rejection. But looking at that invitation, a small, fragile, and incredibly foolish part of my inner child woke up. I thought, maybe time has changed them. Maybe now that Amber is marrying into a wealthy family, they don't need to look at me as a financial asset anymore. Maybe they finally want to see their granddaughter. When David came home from work and saw the invitation on the table, his face darkened instantly. He didn't even pick it up. He just looked at me, his eyes full of deep concern. "Megan," he said gently, taking my hands, "don't do this to yourself. You know exactly who they are. They didn't send this because they miss you. They sent this because the Vance family is high society. Your parents are terrified that if their eldest daughter is missing from the engagement party, it will start a wave of nasty rumors that could ruin Amber's perfect corporate wedding. They are using you as a prop to keep up appearances." I know. I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. I know you're probably right, David, but what if they aren't? What if my dad looks at Lily and realizes what he's missed for 8 years? I don't want Lily to grow up thinking her maternal grandparents hated her. I just want to give them one last chance to be a real family. David sighed, pulling me into a tight embrace. I love you, Megan. And because I love you, I refuse to watch them treat you like garbage again. My dignity won't allow me to sit at a table with people who called you a parasitic bitch for wanting a life of your own. If you feel you absolutely have to go for your own closure, go. But I am staying behind. And please, promise me you'll keep Lily close to your side. I promised him I would. It was the biggest mistake of my life. The night of the engagement party arrived, and the venue was nothing short of a royal gala. They had rented out the grand ballroom of the most exclusive country club in Columbus. Valet drivers in tuxedos were parking luxury sports cars, and crystal chandeliers threw dazzling reflections against the towering glass windows. I wore a simple, elegant navy dress, and Lily looked absolutely angelic in a white lace dress with a matching ribbon in her hair. She held my hand tightly, her wide eyes taking in the massive flower arrangements and the string quartet playing near the entrance. The moment we stepped inside, my illusion of a happy family reunion shattered into a million sharp pieces. Beatrice and Robert were standing near the grand staircase, laughing with a group of wealthy-looking people in tailored suits. When Beatrice caught sight of me, her smile didn't warm up. It froze into a rigid, hostile line. She walked over, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. She didn't look at Lily. She didn't offer a hug. "You actually showed up," Beatrice murmured, her voice dripping with condescension as she adjusted her diamond necklace. "Well, try not to make a scene, Megan. The Vances are very particular about the company we keep. I've instructed the event coordinator to place you at the back." She pointed toward a dimly lit, isolated corner table tucked all the way near the kitchen swinging doors, completely hidden behind a massive ice sculpture. We weren't guests, we were a checklist item, a prop to show the world that the family was whole while being actively hidden from the people who actually mattered. I felt a familiar, crushing weight in my chest, but I swallowed my pride, took Lily's small hand, and walked toward our isolated table in the dark. We sat at that isolated table for over 2 hours. The clattering of dirty dishes from the kitchen doors and the loud shouting of the catering staff filled our ears, completely drowning out the elegant string quartet playing for the real guests across the room. I watched from afar as Amber, glowing in a designer silk dress, floated around the ballroom, holding hands with her wealthy fiancé, Preston. Her face was plastered with a smug, victorious smile. Whenever her eyes accidentally drifted toward our dark corner, her expression instantly hardened into pure, venomous disgust. She hated that I was here. She hated that my presence reminded her of the middle-class reality she was trying so desperately to erase. Lily, being the sweet, patient child she is, sat quietly next to me, coloring on a napkin with a stray pen I found in my purse. Eventually, she looked up at me with tired eyes. "Emma, my legs feel sleepy. Can I just walk around the big ice sculpture?" I looked around. The formal speeches were over and people were mingling. The area around the massive ice swan near our table was relatively quiet. "Okay, sweetie," I said, kissing her forehead. "Just stay right where I can see you, okay? Don't go near the main floor." Lily smiled, smoothing down her white lace dress, and walked a few feet away, fascinated by the melting ice. I watched her closely, my heart aching with a mixture of intense maternal love and bitter regret for bringing her into this hostile house of cards. Suddenly, I saw Amber walking toward our direction. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were locked onto Lily. She was holding her custom-engraved gold-plated iPhone, the one our parents had loudly bragged cost $2,000. I saw her glance around nervously, checking if the wealthy Vance family members were watching. When she thought the coast was clear, she deliberately walked right up to Lily, pretending to admire the ice sculpture. What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds. Amber leaned down, pretending to whisper something to Lily. With a swift, practiced movement of her hand, she slid her heavy gold phone directly into the deep, slouchy pocket of Lily's white lace trousers. Lily didn't even notice. She was too busy looking at the sparkling lights through the ice. Amber immediately backed away, took a deep breath, and let out a blood-curdling, theatrical shriek that echoed across the entire grand ballroom. "My phone! Someone stole my phone!" Amber screamed, throwing her hands in the air, instantly drawing the attention of all 200 high society guests. "My engagement ring details, my wedding planner files, everything is on it. It was just on the table." Before I could even stand up, my father, Robert, stormed over, his face purple with rage. He didn't investigate. He didn't ask questions. He marched straight toward my 8-year-old daughter and pointed a trembling, angry finger in her face. "I knew it!" Robert shouted, his voice booming through the sudden silence of the hall. "You brought your undisciplined street rat kid here to ruin Amber's night. She took it, didn't she? Like mother, like daughter." "What are you talking about?" I yelled, running forward and shielding Lily behind my body. "Lily doesn't even know what an iPhone is. How dare you accuse a child?" Suddenly, Beatrice arrived, her eyes wild with malice. Without a word, she grabbed Lily by her tiny arm, pulling her away from me. Lily began to cry, terrified by the aggressive adults surrounding her. "Let go of her!" I screamed, but Beatrice ignored me, aggressively tearing through Lily's pockets. With a triumphant sneer, Beatrice pulled the heavy gold iPhone out of Lily's trouser pocket and held it high above her head for the entire room to see. Gasps rippled through the elite crowd. Preston Vance and his parents walked closer, their faces filled with absolute revulsion. "Emma, I swear I didn't take it. I don't know how it got there." Lily sobbed, clutching my leg, her little body shaking with terror. Beatrice looked at the Vance family, then looked at me, her face contorting into a psychotic, abusive mask. She wanted to prove to the high society crowd that she was completely righteous and that we were the scum. Right next to us on the buffet line was a massive, commercial-grade silver chafing dish filled with boiling, scalding hot wedding soup, kept at a constant boil by sterno flames beneath it. Before anyone could realize what she was doing, Beatrice grabbed the large silver ladle, scooped up the boiling, steaming liquid, and with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, poured the scalding hot soup directly over my 8-year-old daughter's head. The sound that left Lily's throat wasn't a normal cry. It was a high-pitched, skin-crawling shriek of pure, agonizing torture that pierced through the high ceilings of the ballroom. The boiling, thick liquid instantly turned her pristine white dress into a stained nightmare and began blistering the tender skin of her scalp and forehead. In that exact microsecond, the submissive, traumatized daughter inside me died a violent death. A terrifying, ice-cold clarity took over my entire body. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I shifted into a calculating force of nature. With a raw surge of maternal adrenaline, I lunged forward. I slammed both of my hands into Beatrice's chest, shoving her back with such explosive force that she flew through the air, crashing violently into the tiered dessert table. Glass platters shattered, expensive pastries rained down on her, and she hit the marble floor with a sickening thud, groaning in pain. I didn't give her a second glance. I dropped to my knees, pulling Lily into my arms, desperate to keep the hot liquid away from her eyes. "Emma, it hurts! It burns! I didn't do it, Mama!" she wailed, her little hands shaking in the air. "I know, baby, I know. Mommy's got you," I whispered, my voice incredibly steady despite the chaos erupting around us. Robert rushed forward, his face twisted in rage, shouting, "You crazy bitch! You attacked your mother!" I whipped my head around, looking up at him with eyes so devoid of humanity that he literally froze in his tracks. "Touch me, Robert, and I will end you right here," I said, my voice a deadly low hiss. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The operator answered almost instantly. "911. What is your emergency?" "I am at the Heritage Country Club ballroom," I spoke clearly, my voice echoing in the stunned silence of the room. An adult woman has just committed felony child abuse and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon on an 8-year-old child. The victim has severe third-degree burns to her head and face. I need an advanced life support ambulance and police units dispatched immediately. The attacker is on the floor and she is a flight risk. As I hung up, the venue manager and 2 security guards came rushing over, looking panicked. I stood up, shielding Lily, and pointed directly at the manager's face. "You!" I commanded, my tone razor-sharp. "Lock down the digital CCTV security feed for the entire ballroom right now. If the footage of Amber placing that phone in my daughter's pocket or Beatrice pouring that boiling liquid disappears or is altered by even one frame, I will slap this country club with a $10 million negligent lawsuit before the sun comes up. Do you understand me? Do not touch that server unless the police are standing next to you." The manager turned completely pale, nodding frantically, and instantly sprinted toward the back office. Amber was standing next to her fiancé, Preston, trying to fake tears, sobbing, "She's lying. It was an accident. The child stole my phone." I looked at Amber, then at the prestigious Vance family who were backing away in sheer horror. "Keep talking, Amber," I said coldly, holding my sobbing daughter close. "Every single lie coming out of your mouth is being recorded by these guests. Your little high society fairy tale is officially over." The high society silence of the country club was shattered 5 minutes later by the deafening, rhythmic wail of approaching sirens. The double doors of the grand ballroom flew open, and a team of Columbus police officers stormed inside, followed closely by paramedics carrying emergency medical kits. The paramedics immediately swarmed around Lily, gently wrapping her blistering forehead in specialized sterile burn sheets. My heart broke into a million pieces as they lifted my crying little girl onto a gurney, but I kept my composure, refusing to let my family see me break. 2 police officers approached the back office to review the CCTV security footage with the manager. Meanwhile, Beatrice, who had crawled up from the shattered dessert table, was hysterically screaming to the remaining officers, "Arrest her! My eldest daughter is a lunatic! She assaulted me, and her child is a thief!" 10 minutes later, the 2 officers walked out of the security room. Their faces were grim. They didn't walk toward me. They marched straight past a smug-looking Amber and stopped right in front of Beatrice. "Beatrice Vance. Sorry, Beatrice Evans," the lead officer corrected himself, looking down at her with pure disgust. "You are under arrest for felony child endangerment and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Put your hands behind your back." "What? No, it was a lesson. She stole my daughter's phone," Beatrice shrieked as the iron handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists. "We just watched the tape," the officer said loudly, ensuring the entire room heard every word. "Your younger daughter Amber placed the phone in the child's pocket herself, and you deliberately poured scalding liquid on an 8-year-old. Move." A collective gasp of absolute horror rippled through the crowd. I watched as the prestigious Vance family stood on the stage, their faces filled with unadulterated revulsion. Preston Vance took his engagement ring back from Amber's hand, shoved it into his pocket, and looked at her as if she were a piece of garbage. "We are done," Preston's father announced to the entire room. "Our family will never marry into a bloodline of psychotic child abusers. The wedding is off." Amber collapsed onto the marble floor, screaming and clawing at her dress, her high society dream vanishing into thin air as her mother was dragged out of the country club in handcuffs, flashing police lights painting her disgrace for the entire neighborhood to see. I turned my back on the screaming ruins of my biological family and rode in the ambulance next to my brave little girl. Thank God, after 2 weeks in the hospital, the specialized doctors assured us that Lily's skin would heal completely without any permanent scarring. Beatrice was convicted and received a lengthy prison sentence, while Amber became a social pariah, forced to work 2 low-wage jobs just to pay off the legal fees from their ruined reputation. As for me, I blocked their numbers, erased their names, and cut the final anchor tying me to that toxic past. I walked back into our peaceful home, into the safe, loving arms of David. I look at my husband and my smiling, healthy daughter, knowing that the only family that matters is the one built on love, respect, and protection, not blood. Sitting here today, looking at my daughter Lily, laughing and playing safely in our living room, I realize that some bonds are meant to be broken for your own survival. Standing up to my own mother and having her arrested at that engagement party was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But it taught me that protecting the family you build will always be more important than pleasing the one you were born into. Karma found its way to Beatrice and Amber, and justice ultimately won. But I want to ask you, did I do the right thing by cutting them off completely? What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And if you learned something valuable from my story, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us daily.